Hello everyone and welcome back to Media Linguistics. Before we start, don't forget to like and subscribe if you enjoy our videos and would like to see more. Romans. You probably think of rows of skilled soldiers as well as wealthy citizens feasting on exotic meats and exquisite wines. You might know that the Romans spoke Latin. The Latin language, like almost all other European languages, has its origins in the Proto-Indo-European people who inhabited the eastern edge of Europe. One theory is that about 5,000 years ago, these people started to move to Europe in small waves. One of these waves was the Italic people, who after leaving settled north of the Alps. They then began to traverse further south and settled in the Italian peninsula. However, by this point, the Etruscans, an earlier group that had left the Indo-European homeland numerous centuries earlier, had already inhabited the area and created cities as well as a well-organized society. The Italic peoples who settled in the Italian peninsula soon took over the Etruscan culture, infrastructure, and language. There were many different Italic languages, however, as Rome grew, they were all standardized into Old Latin. Latin has been categorized into many distinct varieties throughout history, but for the purpose of this video, we're going to simplify it down to the three main groups. Old Latin was spoken during the early Roman Republic. Classical Latin was spoken by the elite in the Roman Empire, and Vulgar Latin was spoken by the peasantry throughout the Roman Empire. All three dialects originate from Proto-Italic, the language spoken by the early Italic peoples. Let's look at Old Latin first. There is not much evidence in the grammar of the language, and most of the vocabulary is reconstructed, but we can still observe the sound changes that took place, such as the change from dl in longus to l in longus. Classical Latin was spoken between 75 BC and the 3rd century AD. It was developed by the poets and scholars within the empire as a standardization of Old Latin. Despite being an official language of the Roman Empire, it was often taught only to the elite, so the peasantry often missed out on an opportunity to learn this form of Latin. Here are some examples of classical Latin. Quartus quod ignavus est noli laborare. Lapius ad templum festinavit, quod vir pius erat. There are a few things to mention here. Firstly, Latin is a highly inflected or fusional language. This means that the copula est encodes information that its English equivalent is cannot. Another great example of this is the verb festinavit, because it tells us he, perfect tense, hurried, in just one word. Secondly, Latin has several noun cases. To be specific, nominative, accusative, dative, ablative, and genitive. We can see that in the second sentence, some of the sounds end in This is the accusative case and signifies the presence of a direct object. Now let's look at Vulgar Latin, which emerged in Roman colonies across Europe as an alternative to Classical Latin. The name Vulgar is nothing to do with this dialect being bad. It just shows that this is a common Latin. Vulgar Latin slowly diverged from Classical Latin, and to the aristocracy, it was probably considered informal or colloquial. Let me read out some examples for you. Marcus patri librum dat. Marcos da libru a patre. Here we see a lot of the noun case system and additional particles such as a being added. We also see the verb dat being shortened to da, but this is a normal feature for a language to lose over time. Finally, the word order has quite noticeably changed from subject-object-verb to subject-verb-object. To a native English speaker, this might seem like a logical change. However, it's important to remember that most of the world's languages are subject-object-verb. Because of the lot of cases, the descendants of Vulgar Latin, the Romance languages, created their own particles by combining the ones in Vulgar Latin. There are many more changes that occurred in Vulgar Latin, like the change of the copula from esse to essere. However, it would take a whole video to explain them. Now, let's talk about writing systems. Throughout the early stages of Latin, the Etruscan script was used. But since the Romans liked to etch letters into stone, the alphabet became increasingly angular over time. Another noticeable change was the use of interpuncts and then spaces between words, which made it a lot easier to understand long sentences. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please don't forget to like, subscribe and comment below